everybody, and welcome to this 2000 AD 45th anniversary panel, 2000 AD Beyond Borders. Although 2000 AD is considered a quintessentially British comic, air quotes, it has a long history of showcasing creators from many different countries and parts of the world, which proudly continues today. I'm Kelly Kanayama, a comics critic and scholar whose research focuses on Judge Dredd, among other comics. And I am here with Michael Carroll, Arthur Wyatt, and Chris Burnham to talk about working on 2000 AD from, I guess you could say, across the sea, the other side of the Greenwich Meridian, or however else you want to phrase it. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Hey.
So getting started, I'm sure this is a question you get asked a lot on these kinds of things, but what was your experience with 2000 AD? Like, did you read it growing up? Did you come to it as an adult, etc.? This is for everybody.
Sure. Yeah. I'll jump in because I'm nearest. I was reading from Prog 1, so I was a kid when it came out. Well, obviously I'm still a kid, but I was a kid when it came out, and so I got the very first issue, and I have all of them. I haven't stopped. So 2000 has been more important to me than almost anything else in my entire life besides my wife and oxygen. And I'm not even going to say in which order those two go, but yeah. So it's been a huge part of my life. I mean, I've been here from the very, very beginning. So yeah. God, I should move on. No. I'm happy where I am. So yeah, it's been very important to me. I've got every issue, and there was a point back about, I don't know, at the early 2010s when I calculated that I'd earned more from 2000 AD than I'd spent on it. And I was able to say to my mother, told you I wasn't wasting my time reading those comics when I was a kid. So yeah. I don't think a day fails to go by when I don't rub that in her face.
I don't think I've hit break even.
Sorry, what?
I said, I don't think I've hit break even on that yet. Yeah, so I got handed a Judge Dredd album annual when I was like, I don't know, very small, before I could read. And it was the 1982 one with all the sort of McMahon strips and the cutaway diagrams of things. And I just poured over that. So that was kind of my introduction. I didn't really read it properly till much later. And I sort of got started on the 2008 monthly, and then finally started picking up the prog on the Bad Company cover that says War Zombies Bury 'em. So that's my vintage.
I think I first, as an American, it took me a while. I was aware of Judge Dredd just as like a thing that was out in the world, but I don't think I read a Dredd story until the Batman versus Judge Dredd Simon Beasley thing. And then there were some issues of Dredd Rules, which is like an early 90s Dredd compilation series. Like every issue had one of those Beasley rock and roll stories as like the actual reason to buy it. And then there's a bunch of like weird catch-all stuff. Some of which really stuck with me. There's a one, I think it's called Strange Customs, where Dredd's running customs, and there's this giant dude shows up, and they interrogate him, and they can't figure out what's this guy hiding, and they end up doing surgery on him, and he's got like 8 hearts and like 3 livers, so he's like actually smuggling organs in. Which I think about it all the time. Like every time I have to go through customs or whatever, I think about what they can find inside me. But I didn't start reading the prog proper until, I don't know, 10 years ago. Like once I've got back issues in physical form, but like I never subscribed to it until it was available digitally. So however old that is, 10 years ago, something like that.
Yeah, it wasn't really that available in the US in physical form. I mean, not as a prog, if my memory serves me.
They've taken many cracks at reprinting this stuff in a million different formats, most of which I got when I was in my late 20s or whatever, when I was, had some disposable income and was at comic conventions all the time. Yeah. So I, got all the Strontium Dog and Slam Slade, and like they put out a lot of stuff.
Did you get the quality?
Oh yeah, quality.
Quality.
Yeah, debatable quality. Just stretch that thing out; it'll be fine.
Yeah, aspect ratios. What are they?
Yeah, just all planets are ellipses in the future.
What about you, Kelly? How did you find?
Oh, thank you. Well, I'm actually in a similar boat to Chris. I mean, without the Simon Bisley Batman things, I read those after I got into Judge Dredd. I also started, I think, about 10 years ago. It was just because I was part of this comics group on Facebook, and everybody always talked about Judge Dredd, and I'd heard of him, of course. I was aware of, like Chris, I was aware of him as a guy in comics, but I didn't really know anything about it. And I thought, okay, I'm going to figure out what everyone is talking about. And so I just started at the beginning. And
bold.
Yeah, but
wow.
I think that helped because I got to see sort of how the comic started out from the really early days, when it was aimed at children still. And I think that tickled the part of my brain that thought, man, I remember being a kid. It would have been so cool if I'd read this when I was a kid. And I think from there, it just developed into this weird fascination with all the sort of strangeness of the satire and the world that so many people over time had created, and the sort of weird concepts of America that came through in what at the time was being written by just a bunch of British guys, some of whom had firsthand experience of America, like John Wagner, and some who clearly did not.
Yeah. Well, John is American, of course.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But he lived in the UK so long that he was able to get a different perspective.
Accent.
Yeah. But it is interesting though that Judge Dredd, created in a British comic, is created by an American and a Spaniard, who Carlos being the artist. I think he was from Spain.
Yeah, exactly.
So they automatically come in with a different perspective. They're not following. They weren't following what was then the tradition of standard boys British comics. They came in with a different idea. And of course, with Pat Mills and Alan Grant and all the other people involved, they were booking the trend from the beginning. But yeah, I'm a kind of a historian, I suppose, of British comics to some degree. But it was just when 2000 came out first, we were all like 11 years old in school, and we were going, "Oh my, this is what comics should have been like all along." Everything else we've been reading up to that point pretty much was tame in comparison, just in terms of the ideas. It was electric, and it still is to some degree. I mean, I still get a buzz every morning every Monday morning when the letterbox flaps, and I run downstairs to see has the prog arrived, and I go, "Hey!" and I rip it open. And if it's a Judge Dredd story written by me, I'm disappointed because I know what happens. If it's someone else's story, it's like, yay!
Well, speaking of different perspectives, Michael Carroll, you coming from an Irish background, which I think, to my layperson's perspective, I feel like in some ways it's a lot closer to Britain than some others might. Yeah, other cultural ones might be, but in some ways it's very different.
Yeah, we are two nations separated by a common language, as the old joke goes. But geographically, of course, I mean, I can drive to the United Kingdom from here if we count Northern Ireland.
Right.
It's a Northern Ireland as well as an ordinary Ireland. Everybody just know that. I can drive there from here if I'm allowed. But so we have the Irish have a complicated relationship with the British, particularly with the English. But we have. When the first issue of 2008 came out, and it opens with the story Invasion, which has got foreign tanks tunneling across London, and it was supposed to be quite a shocking image, and we're going, no, we're used to seeing British foreign invaders on our land. It wasn't sure. We saw it on the news. But yeah, so we have a different kind of perspective than any solely British creators might have. But we're not that far removed. But we also have the victim mentality, which we're really good at playing up. Oh, you oppressed us for 800 years, blah, 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 blah. And that means for the next 800 years, we get to keep going on about it. So,
I think that's fair.
A long way to go. We still have 700 years to keep going. So, yeah, but we don't have the quite the same attitude that others might have to the British. You know, we hate them, but at the same time, we still want to be their friend.
Well, how does that translate into writing something like Judge Dredd?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I remember reading that Gareth Ennis was saying, because Gareth Ennis is from Ireland as well, and from the Northern Ireland. He said one of the problems he had was that he was too enamored of Dredd to properly write him. I'm not sure how he feels now. And at the beginning, I had the same problem. I was too much of a fan. It wasn't necessarily because I was Irish, but because I'd grown up reading this guy, and I was in awe of the character. And I realized I had to scale back everything and write Dredd as a person rather than write him as a superhero, that kind of thing. But I don't think my Irishness necessarily had any impact, except for the story that I actually wrote that was set here, which was good fun.
I was actually going to ask you about that. I mean, you've reincorporated post-apocalyptic Ireland back into the Dredd universe with Judge Fintan Joyce.
Yeah, I had to do that because Gareth and Steve Dillon had done that with the Emerald Isle storyline, where they basically made Ireland into this kind of theme park, which was, it was basically shamrocks and leprechauns all over the place. And I mean, it is like that in real life, of course, but we don't want people to know that. Yeah, so I figured, well, hang on a minute, that was always a bit diddly idle, tip of your hat and top of the morning to you kind of thing, which the problem with Dredd is that if you do any kind of parody in Dredd, it's still part of the canon. It still becomes real, because unlike Batman or Spider-Man, we can't just pretend things didn't happen. Dredd ages in real time. So I figured, well, hang on, it's been 30 years. Let's go back to the Emerald Isle and show a more toned down perspective on it. So, I mean, I had different types of Irishy things, like, for example, when they get to Judge Joyce's Mammy's house, she makes them take off their boots outside the door. So Dredd spends the rest of the episode with his stripy socks. And she basically insists that Dredd will have a cup of tea, even though he doesn't want one, this kind of thing. So I think it gave me a chance to have a little bit of fun with it, but at the same time, paper over some of the things that Gareth and Steve did with the Emerald Isle, which was still hilarious, by the way. The spud guns and all that sort of stuff was just brilliant.
I mean, I do know from talking to PJ that there is actually a potato-themed theme park in Ireland, which seems beyond anything that...
It's themed around the Tato brand of crisps.
Yeah.
Like, it's not even just potatoes, it's themed around a crisp.
Yes,
brand.
I know. It's shameful. It used to be a Butlins and now it's Tato theme park.
Oh, that's better then.
I can't even look you all in the eye now. I'm too bad.
Is all the food like just crisps or what?
I don't know. I think you only go there if you're very, very, very badly behaved. I don't think
Oh, road trip though.
Yeah, it's embarrassing, but there you go. But it must be great fun. I don't know. Other people talk now.
Well, Chris, you're American. What's that like? No, just in general. No, I was gonna actually say, you're one of the very few American artists to not just to do a cover for 2000 AD, but to do one for their 2000th Prague, which is a huge deal. Yeah. I looked it up. I think it's like you, Bill Sienkiewicz, and maybe one other person.
Yeah, something like that's crazy.
Yeah. So how do you take on the challenge of covering the galaxy's greatest comic on such an auspicious occasion?
I mean, it was very nerve-wracking. I'd done, I think, one cover before. I did the cover to 1950, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Which I guess must have come off all right. My friend Chris Moreno helped me with the, it's Dredd kind of in reflection. It's kind of tough to describe, but my buddy Chris Moreno helped me figure out the position of the guys getting killed in the background, because they had to perfectly fit into these shards of glass. And so it's one of those weird comic book puzzles where you have to have an organic pose that also fits perfectly into the space, allotted without kind of tangenting out in a weird, awkward way. And I couldn't crack the case, and he just figured it out so quick. It was so annoying. I've been slaving over this thing for 2 hours. He figures it out in 30 seconds. I was so mad. But yeah, I just got a weird email from Matt Smith saying, who is, earthling incarnation of Tharg or whatever, however we kayfabe this out. Just in case you want to do a cover for Prague 2000, like, holy, yes, I do want to do that. Very nerve-wracking. Rich Johnston told me years later that I only got the gig because Frank Whiteley turned it down first.
Jeez, that's so mean.
Harsh.
I mean, fair enough. Like, I mean, it doesn't bother me. I don't know why he felt the need to tell me that, but like, it doesn't bother me. What a jerk, though. But yeah, I did all sorts of. I was trying to come up with a very clever cover, and I couldn't crack the case on it. And so I ended up doing like a redo of Nick McMahon's famous cover of Dredd sitting on top of the word crime or whatever it is with a big. What is it? Spud gun? Or what's the big weird rifle thing called?
I don't know.
Lawgiver?
Law rod.
Yeah. I think so. The big one.
It sounds weird to say out loud.
Whatever it's called. So I just swapped out 2000 for crime and called it a day. But tried to mix anatomy is so exaggerated and weird that when I tried to recreate the pose with my more realistic or standard or whatever style, it doesn't work if you try to give him real bones and stuff. So I had to tone it down to make it work, which was kind of a weird puzzle to do. But hey, look at that!
Oh! There he is.
Sorry, that's it. Yes, I've been looking it up on Barney. There you go. It's a great cover.
It is a great cover.
Thank you.
Love that cover. Yeah.
But yeah, one of my greatest honors in comics was getting to draw that thing. Very, very strange. Yeah, very very few Americans get to draw these covers at all, and to do the big 2000 one is crazy.
Yeah. Well, is it different working on a cover for 2000 AD versus working on an American comic, or is it just a cover is a cover?
It's basically like the only weird thing is that it's magazine dimensions rather than comic book dimensions. It's just a little squatter. So I mean, it's basically just you cut an inch off the bottom of the paper or whatever. But it's basically, I mean, draw a picture of a scary looking guy with a gun. Like, it's basically the same job.
Yeah. Well, it's actually funny you bring up Whiteley, because I feel like, as somebody, you've both worked a lot with Grant Morrison.
Mm-hmm.
And, Morrison's one of those people who, like, the early wave of people who got their start on 2000 AD as well. And I was just wondering if that's, do you feel like that has sort of seeped into your work at all, just over the years of working with someone who comes from that background?
Probably. I think it comes in from all directions, and I think we've kind of gravitated together because we've got a similar sensibility. I guess. I mean, I'm a big. Vin and I are both Mobius fans, and so I was trying to do a Mobius thing for quite a while, and then when I got the Batman gig, it was like, oh, I just found myself looking at so much. Vin is Frank Whiteley's real name. I was just looking at so much of his stuff to just get the costumes right. And it just since he's such a Mobius guy, my style is kind of like very easily soaked up the Whiteley influence. So it kind of became an avatar of his or whatever for a couple of years. I think I've broken free of it a little bit. But then I mean, I've also read every comic Grant's ever written, so I just know exactly what they are going for. It's like I know what a good Grant comic looks like. And I also very much know what a bad one looks like. And I just want to draw the good ones.
It is funny you mentioned Mobius as well, because I was thinking about 2000 AD, especially in the early days, kind of in addition to its subject matter, made its mark by having these sort of more European style panel layouts, as well as this kind of traditional British and also American, like what we would be used to seeing. They had they played around with that a lot as well. But
I keep trying to do the weird British Frank Bellamy layouts with like the crazy panel shapes that don't make any sense. I cannot figure out how to do it. I love I love looking at it. Like I find it a challenge to read at first, but now I'm kind of in the zone, and I read my kids' Thunderbirds comics all the time. It's so strange, and I can't figure out how to do it, because I recently did a battle story with Garth Ennis, and I was determined to crack the case on how it works. I couldn't figure it out, so I just drew it the way I would normally do it. But I was looking at so much. It's Eric Bradbury's Crazy Keller, and I was just like, how does he do it? I couldn't figure it out. I read the entire, I read 200 pages of this to draw a 14-page story.
Yeah.
And it's like use of my time.
12 panels to a page, and it's not even a grid. It's just like an assemblage of circles and squares and
I don't
oblongs.
understand how they can get their heads around it. It's such a weird way of working, but I once you get the flavor for it, I think it's delicious.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Arthur, I was actually going to ask you, what is it like being a British person in America and working on Judge Dredd and also on 2000 AD generally?
I have not been back for since 2016, so oof. Yeah, it's quite a while. I guess I've gone native here a little. It's kind of interesting working on Dredd in particular, because that's the whole thing of Dredd is it's sort of set in America, but it's not really set in America. It's very much based on British things. So I kind of have to work with a sort of a mindset of I'm not going to, try and make this based on, anything that's particularly happening in America, or, any sort of law enforcement subjects that are American based, which slides around a lot given some of the subjects are tackled. But it definitely is interesting that it's in this sort of floating, not quite America space, and you kind of have to maintain that. Then the movie stuff I worked on, I think I kind of collapsed that a lot more. That was more, this is an interpretation of America in that one. Mm-hmm. I guess just because I had the chance to, yeah. I mean, I guess it's really, is it Johannesburg? I forget where they shot it.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
It was, yeah.
With some CGI blocks in the background.
Yeah.
But
I love the look of the movie, how the blocks actually look like blocks. Like I think the city looks so much more oppressive when everything is straight up and down, and there's no goofy inviting curves. Like it looks much more horrible.
Yeah, they got a cool look. I mean, it's cool that it's kind of a distinct look. I like but yeah, in terms of like writing sensibility, I think there's definitely this sort of thing where you are shaped by what's come before. I don't know that moving away from the UK means that it's changed. I don't know where I'm going with that, Fred. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm not a big subscriber to this, like, you have to be British to work on it.
Sure.
But there is kind of like a certain sensibility that comes with it, which is weird because, as you guys pointed out, John Wagner is originally American, which I guess makes it a very transatlantic product.
Yeah. I mean, well, how do you sort of, is there a way to sort of stop yourself from sliding over to, especially with writing about the policing aspect of Judge Dredd, which is a hot topic in both the UK and the US, also in a lot of other countries.
Yeah, I mean, I think because it has to be a little bit heightened and silly to be a 2000 AD. That kind of keeps it from sort of getting that extra level of specificity that would kind of make it too American. I don't know, I'm kind of rambling there a little. But it's certainly interesting also if you start writing about Britsit on top of Mega City 1, because Mega City 1 is America, but not really quite. It's more of a sort of parody of various aspects of British culture. And then you have Britsit, which is that squared. So I usually rate those guys as just terrible.
Yeah, how do you do Britsit? I mean, because I'm not as familiar with Britsit, but I never got the impression that it was as stupid.
Yeah, Britsit is weird because it's never been defined exactly what it is. Is it just London, or is it all of Britain, or whatever? It's kind of wishy-washy. But I think the best way to think of it is to pronounce it not as Britsit, but as Brexit, because that's really what it's all about. Because they're separate from Europe for some reason that we don't understand. But yeah, I've written Brexit a few times, and it's very hard not to write it as present day London, which I know quite well. And at the end you go, no, hang on, no, it's supposed to be set in the future. But when you do a good parody of London, it can be set at any time anyway. So it's very strange. And most of Dredd's world is, and I don't want to be disingenuous here, but it is kind of made up as you go along.
Sure.
We don't really know exactly how big Megacity 1 is, or where exactly Megacity 2 is, or how many different city-states there are in say in Asia, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's kind of at the whim of the creators as we go. And every now and again we do get some of the fans who will try and map this thing, and you kind of can't map it. It just doesn't really go. The important thing to remember, I think, is something that John Wagner said himself years ago. I can't remember what the context was, but someone was asking a very complicated thing about one Dredd tale or other. He went, "It's only a story." It's not the verisimilitude where you try to create something real. It is, each story exists to tell that story, and if you can build on something else, that's great. But you can't analyze it too deeply. It's like trying to analyze Star Trek. You just kind of keep finding plot holes and make you go, "No, hang on, that doesn't work with this." But you have to. Especially at the beginning, the early days of 2000, you have to remember every issue was effectively disposable.
Right.
In that there wasn't the collection culture. There wasn't the culture then of always going back to what was there before. So when someone says, "Oh yeah, in Prague 30, suddenly Dredd was a 20-year veteran on the streets," and in any other context that would have been thrown away. But because it's Judge Dredd, we now have to live with the fact that he was. He graduated in 2079, which means that he was born around about 2066, which means we're catching up now to Dredd's birth. So, that kind of thing. We have to live with all these things. Where was I going with that? I don't know. But yeah,
I kind of like the sort of Al Ewing approach to continuity, which is basically it's all there, it's all valid, but only the bit of it that applies to what you're doing right now is in frame, so to speak. And that's a pretty healthy attitude. I mean, he's these days got the entirety of the Marvel universe to think about there, which is a bit bigger than anything you get with 2000 AD. But I think Dredd's universe is kind of getting up there as sort of one of the major shared fictional universes that has a bunch of people working on it.
I think certainly on this side of the Atlantic, it's the big one.
Yeah, I mean, 2000 doesn't tend to have many of those. So like the Rogue Trooper kind of goes in for a bit of a shared universe thing. There's a bunch of stuff that's arguably part of the Dredd universe and then kind of buds off as its own thing, like Robo Hunter. I think when that started, there were like mega cities and there was a Brexit and people said Drock, but it sort of drifted apart into its own parallel thing that's something else.
The same with the ABC Warriors and Nemesis and all that. They're universes that are they're maybe shared, but the links are kind of tenuous.
Yeah. Well, I think Pat Mills does this a lot. Like, he will have characters from different universes, from different things that he writes in 2000 AD. They'll show up in different strips, or they'll reference, a character in one strip that he writes might reference a character from another one. Or it turns out, if they're set in different time periods, then one of them's actually related to or descended from somebody else. I mean, I think Garth Ennis does this as well, not on 2000 AD, but just with the comics he writes, he will do this with certain characters.
Did Helter Skelter as well, which was like entirely that.
Yeah. Have you read that? Sorry? It's just that everybody just shows up
Yeah.
For reasons.
There's dimensions or something. Merge it together.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all the whole multiverse get out of jail free card everybody is playing these days. Well, they're doing it in Marvel and in DC at the same time. So I want to see them all cross over.
Well, basically,
we want to see the little mermaid crossing over with the Incredible Hulk and with the Little House on the Prairie and the $6 Million Man. I mean, I think we all want that.
I think they could do that now. I mean, I need to check the Little House on the Prairie and $6 Million Man, like who owns those properties, but they could definitely do the Little Mermaid and the Incredible Hulk now.
Absolutely, yeah.
When, Marvel? When? But this one is for everybody. I was wondering as well, with the way that sort of 2000 AD works and the way just comics work nowadays, how does that affect your approach with creating? Because, now everything is so much more global. 2000 AD is digital, so if you can get it from pretty much anywhere, as long as you can access that. People are, I don't know if I'd say a lot more informed, but there are a lot more sources of information about what is happening around the world. Politics are, I think, more clearly globally intertwined. How does that affect what you all are doing?
I mean, probably.
Great. Moving on. No.
That's a loaded question. Well, it certainly has got loaded answers because when I started out writing, we didn't have, before 2008, there was no internet, so you had to look up things in books. And now there are no books; there's only an internet. We
just like Star Wars.
Yeah, well, we have this situation with the global world, right? Yeah. So a couple of years ago, I wrote a script called a series called Dreadnoughts, and for various reasons, it was delayed in coming out. And when it did finally come out, it was quite well received. But it always happened to land at the exact same time that America was pretty much disappearing up its own backside in terms of police corruption and chaos and war and the whole George Floyd thing and all that sort of stuff. And it was chaotic, and people saw an incredible amount of parallels between my story and what was happening in the real world. But I'd written it all long before that had broken. The police brutality and the heavy-handedness and the right-wing attitudes and all that sort of stuff. So the way it's always been is that readers will always find depth in a story that the writer doesn't necessarily intend. And it can be because of the current political climate, or just coincidence, or just because they're looking for meaning, which is often the case. So every writer's job, and I presume it also counts for artists as well, but every writer's job primarily is to just tell the story as best as they can and not try and, hammer a message in there. But real world stuff influences the readers outside of the comic, and then when they're reading the comic, that still lingers. Sometimes there are traces. A bit like if fart in an elevator, you even after you're long gone, the next person is still going to go, something happened here. So with that, when people look at Judge Dredd and they go, oh my God, 2000 AD predict the future, it's because they're looking for a match. If they look at all of the things that 2000 AD did, they go, yeah, 2000 AD predicts the future, much in the same way that a pigeon will pick a specific breadcrumb out of a pile. It's just chance. So it's a case of, I suppose, what would you call it? It's a bias that we have towards wanting to see patterns. So, sometimes, when we see, especially with the heavy-handed laws that happen in the States.
Certain kinds of patterns are going to match more often. Like, I know I've kind of hit that twice, that I've had stories that have been sort of dealing with riots or police brutality come out just as stuff was really kicking off, and both times it's been kind of coincidence, but I guess it's not a coincidence that coincidence keeps happening. Never feels good.
Well, it's like they say with The Simpsons, they say, oh, The Simpsons predicted this and The Simpsons predicted that. Yeah. And somebody said, no, it's just that the problems haven't been fixed in over 30 years.
Exactly. The same thing crops up again, and people will see that as significant when really it's an outlier. But that happens. But you can steer that in a way. You can have a look at the news and go, well, what's likely to happen next? When's it likely to happen? And what story, if I write it now, will be coming out then? You can kind of do that to a degree. But most science fiction gets 99.9% of it wrong. But people, when they see the 0.1% that gets correct, they go, oh, Star Trek predicted such and such, or Star Wars predicted. No, Star Wars. But it's just pattern matching that we're, or pattern seeking that we're good at.
Chris, as an artist,
I have nothing intelligent to say. Yeah,
and as an American artist, what do you? Sorry, just asking it. I just never get to ask the questions in the way that I get asked stuff.
Oh yeah, yes. So, what's it like to be a white man in comics?
Yeah, what's it like to be an artist in comics? No, no, but yeah, like what is it like? What is that like from the artist end of things? Because we've heard from what it's like to write it, but when you actually have to draw it.
I mean, thankfully there's Google Images, so you can look up what things look like, which is helpful.
Crazy Keller, all the weapons.
Man, yes. I mean, Garth sent so much reference over. So then it's like there's so many different variations on Sherman tanks or whatever. Just like, did you want this one or this one? So many, like, a lot of these things have been continuously made for like the last 60 years or whatever. It's like, is this Jeep right, or is this a version from the 70s? Like, it's to me they all look the same, but he can count the rivets or whatever. Thankfully, the only thing he busted my balls about was like my Nazi helmets were starting to get a little mushy looking, but he didn't make me redraw anything. I don't know. I mean, sometimes you got to be more. We try to be more thoughtful than maybe we're in the past about representations of things. It might have been you actually. I'm not sure. There was an issue of Batman Inc. where Talia's son, the Heretic, is getting like dressed up in his raiments or whatever, and I was just like, he's got some women in waiting or whatever who are dressing him. So I just made them look like like Tex Avery, like sexy Arabian ladies. I was like, I didn't think about it at all. It's just like that's who they'd be, and they're dressing them. And
I forgot about that.
A couple people. If it wasn't you, it was they were like mindless ones.
This one wasn't me. It was someone else who got mad on the internet.
I got pounced out.
Unusually.
Like, oh yeah, fair enough. I mean, it was 100% thoughtless. So like, just like didn't think about it at all. It's like, oh right, fair enough. There's
Yeah. But I also feel like sorry.
No, but I mean, I do think it's weird that like it's smelling the fart. Like I, as a kid who grew up in the 80s, watching cartoons that were made in the 40s by people who grew up in the 20s or whatever. So like that's literally I'm still thinking about stuff that like someone else watched 100 years ago. So just like how long a dumb little notion can live on in someone's head before it gets kicked out. So I think that sort of thing is interesting.
Well, what about with art, have you ever drawn anything where people go, oh, that's just like the thing, or it looks uncannily like
thing, I'm intentionally copying it. Yeah, I don't think I really get the that's so prescient sort of thing. That sort of thing doesn't happen to me. Although there's the Nameless uses a lot of like Elon Musk is kind of a character in Nameless, and so they're like the main Darius Dax or whatever. That's not his name. I can't remember what his name was. Is very much Elon Musk's scalp on Richard Branson's like face. Like I just like master like Buddy Monster Maker on him or whatever. And so that has kind of like he's he bought a moon base and they're like quarantining, and so like that has proven to be not so much present, but it just kind of like rhymes with realities. It's like, oh, that's kind of weird, but like it wasn't my fundamental idea. So like people post it all the time. It's like, yeah, I certainly drew that, but
I think that's a really good way to put it, actually, that it rhymes with reality.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Versus trying to shoot for
Actually,
like a specific echo or a specific.
Right.
Oh yeah, it's exactly like this thing.
I'm writing this down. Rhymes with reality.
Yeah, that's really good.
I am so stealing that. I think I probably thought of that first, just didn't tell anybody. I'm pretty sure I did. Yeah, but that's how I remember it.
Well, I mean, that could. I was going to say that could be the tagline for this. It was going to be like 2000 AD, 45th, like a fart in an elevator.
Oh, don't do that. Well, yeah, rhyming with reality or something. That's pretty cool, actually. Yeah.
But
can I ask Chris a question?
Yeah.
All right.
You guys
Chris,
go for it.
Chris, if you were you're fairly familiar with most 2000 AD. I know you said you only got some of the back issues, but is there any character from beyond Dredd from 2000 AD's history that you feel really drawn to that you'd like to work on?
I mean, my favorite Dredd story is the one with the blobs, but Matt Smith already wrote me something with the blobs because I asked for it specifically.
Yeah. But outside of Dredd, though, I mean, what about something like Strontium Dog or?
I love Strontium Dog. It's a bummer that he hasn't appeared since Carlos died, right? Is that true?
No.
Well, it's been a
few. No, there was a
a
recent thing, but it's not.
We did a sort of young Johnny Alpha story but we haven't carried on the main storyline as such.
Yeah. I love Strontium Dog. What a fun outfit. I love the. I'm very bummed out when they reveal that he and Wolf are not gay. Like, what a waste!
I know.
What a waste to make them not a couple because they so clearly are. And it's like, oh no, he's laying pipe all over the galaxy. What are you talking about, man?
That does not exclude anything.
Yeah, I was going to say that doesn't not make him gay.
Fair enough. You're right. You're right. Fair enough.
But yeah, he's laying pipe, but only with the hot alien ladies.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. Sure.
You saved me. Thank you.
Garak in Star Trek. Also a waste.
Oh man.
Yeah.
This is apropos of nothing, but I saw a video of Zelensky just like strutting through a lobby the other day, and I was like, that guy looks just like Captain Kirk, just like he's got a real Captain Kirk swagger to him.
Yeah.
That means nothing to no one, but it struck me.
Hopefully he is more responsible as a leader.
Right.
But yes, this is okay. This could be the official appeal. 2000 AD. Let Chris Burnham draw gay Johnny Alpha.
Yeah. Yes.
Big gay Johnny Alpha. Yes, please.
I'm into it. Yes. I'm giving ideas away. I want Henry Flint to draw a big crossover with everyone in it. Like do the whole Pat Mills verse with like the Nemesis and ADC Warriors. I want Slane in there too. I want everyone fighting one of those different time traveling dinosaurs all across the universe.
Oh, Henry Nemesis would be really good.
He did it already, right? I mean, he
did like a Nemesis that went from, I want to say, a end of a Kevin O'Neill run right up to Kevin O'Neill doing the final Nemesis.
Right. Yeah.
How did my brain just? Yeah.
That's a good one. And bring back Shakara too. Get Shakara in there. God damn it.
Yeah,
but who will draw all of that?
I want
Chris.
No. I want nothing to do with it. I just want to read it.
Oh. I meant to ask you this earlier, but like, so as an American, I'm gonna keep bringing this up. But what is it like, reading Judge Dredd, this British comic that's sort of about America, but not really. And it's not even, it's about this sort of exaggerated version of America that's actually Britain. Yeah.
The thing that I find the most incongruous is the lack of definite articles. So like Dredd works for Justice Department, but in America, he would work for the Justice Department. And so there's all sorts of weird little things like that I kind of drive me a little crazy. I mean, obviously it could not be less important, but like it's all I can notice.
That's a really good, that is true. I never sort of picked that up, but now that you've mentioned it, I'm like, I always say, he works for the Justice Department, but if you see it written down, I think maybe now they've started putting it in, but certainly in the early days, I don't think they did.
It's crazy future lingo where they're just shortening everything.
Well, that's how people talk over here.
Yeah. There's a couple weird Britishisms that totally spoiled a couple stories. There was I think it was a Rob Williams one where it's like the end of it is the Mega City one gets like covered with ice or something, and like the end punchline was something like, "Oh, we've got to get grit on it" or something. And I was like, what does that mean? And what is grit the sort of like rock salt you use to melt ice or something? Yeah, like it just went. It did not understand what the hell he's talking
See,
about.
I'm probably now screwing that up the other way and introducing American stuff that nobody knows what the fuck it is to Dredd stories. And I blew the PG.
that is something I struggle with, as an Irish writer, trying not to use Irish phrases that wouldn't crop up. For a great example, when I'm teaching classes, I always say to the kids, to students, we have this Irish thing of saying, well, I was just after coming home and I was just after going to the shops, which means that I had just gone to the shop. I had just come home. But we say just after, I don't know why. And I had to censor that in a story that I was editing for someone else. And an Irish writer who absolutely insisted that, no, they say that all over the world. They do not know what that is. Yeah. But that happens a lot. Actually, it's strange enough, the writer in that case was American born but living in the UK actually at the time. But it happens a lot when I read a Stephen King book or something and they say, well, the murder happened at 4:15, and I'm going, is that 4:15? Is that like 3:45? What does that mean? And then they say, well, I don't know, I was grading on a curve, and we go, what? We don't know what that is. And then they go, touchdown, and we go, what? So yeah, we're not at a loss. We're just making this stuff up as we go along.
So is that something that we those of us on or from different sides of the Atlantic, just we need to suck it up because America's been doing it for so long?
Yeah, we have to. Yeah, we have to try and absorb the other cultural idioms in such a way that we can fake using them. And most of my books and stories tend to be set in the States. So I've been faking it for 30 years.
Yeah.
But it is so strange sometimes when you look at a phrase and you go, yeah, we wouldn't say that. Mm-hmm. But then of course, we don't say things like I could care less. Over here, we say I couldn't care less, because that's actually literally what it means. People say I could care less.
That tries to be crazy too.
It only works as irony. It doesn't work as a literal phrase.
Well,
that's funny that you associate that with American. I just associate. I say it could not care less as well, but I feel like the other way is rising up. Trust me.
Yeah. Well,
I don't know if I could even.
You get it in Fenton Joyce, all the Irishisms.
Yeah.
Well, we
one guy.
At all. We should have known better, because that's a good one. But yeah, we have to watch these things when we're writing. If I'm trying to write Dredd's dialogue, I have to be very careful not to use anything that's actually not really Judge Dredd himself, because the way I found the best way to write Judge Dredd is to give him as little dialogue as possible and let his fists and gun do the talking. So you get the other characters to talk, around Dredd, but it's very important to keep that sense of well, at least a touch of credibility with the thing. It's you don't have to be 100% real, but you have to be quite close to it.
And I mean, like Mega City Citizens, they can totally just be a bunch of British archetypes, and it just flows. No one bats an eyelid.
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. Like, I mean, if Mike Welcher were here, he'd be able to answer this better. But I'm just curious. Given that 2000 AD has, I think much more of a global audience now than it did certainly in its early days, how British are you, or Irish or whatever, are you like allowed to be before people start getting confused?
Well, I think I don't know. I mean, I've never had anything rejected on those grounds. Only on grounds of quality. So lucky me, eh? But yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I suppose if we wrote a story that had tons of references to something that only exists within one particular clime, for example, if we had Judge Dredd's characters talking about Crossroads, which was a British sitcom, or British soap opera that's long gone now, this day, something of that nature, then it would obviously be resoundingly and immediately rejected with good reason. But yeah, I don't think it's that much of a problem. One of the things is that by the time you're allowed to write Judge Dredd, and Arthur will know this too, we'll have read and written an awful lot of other things. So we're familiar with what's about.
I will say, John Wagner, like through the early years of Dredd, there are a ton of incredibly obscure British 70s and 80s cultural references, not just in block names, but like in all kinds of stuff. So yeah, I don't think it's ever been an issue.
Yeah, I mean,
it just kind of exists as its own weird thing.
Yeah, exactly. Did you find this having to Google things?
The weird thing for me now is I think I'd actually have a lot of trouble writing a contemporary British thing. I'm kind of coming at the other angle now. If I was writing something set in the UK, I'd have to find some reason to set it in the 2000s or the 90s.
When you were there, yes.
Yeah.
That's a point. Yeah, but of course, everything because we're writing in a heightened reality, the idea of the future or a future, not necessarily the actual future, then we are allowed to get away with things that we wouldn't otherwise. So I've had a case many years ago where I was writing a script that was set in Chicago, and the artist drew this office scene, but there's a tiny thing, the plugs on the wall, the sockets on the wall, the power sockets, were standard British/Irish power sockets with the 3 pins.
Oh no!
And I had to catch him up, but I said, no, hang on a minute, you can't do that. And he went, oh, and he suddenly realized what he was. And then occasionally we have to do things like tell the artist, okay, the driver is driving along, the passenger is next to him. The passenger is going to be on the driver's right, on the right side of the car, not on the left side of the car. And if it's a British artist or an Irish artist, they might not think of that, or Australian, they might not think of that because what for them as the norm is suddenly reversed. So yeah, that's one reason judges have motorbikes. There's no left and right side on the motorbike. Oh yes.
That's
funny.
Yeah, now I'm going to go back and look at in Judge Dredd when they depict the expressways and things. I'm going to look at what side of the road everybody drives on, or if they're all just going one way.
Well, sometimes it's easier just to have a one-way street, just because that way the artist.
I think a lot of it is just one way, because otherwise it just gets too much.
Yeah.
Well, it is kind of nice to know that these things still happen in a way. Like there are legends of, in the early days of 2000 AD, this is when they were using a lot of artists from like Spain or from Argentina or that part of the world, and everything was via post, and the ones I remember are there was an instruction to the artist like, oh, there's this crowd, there's a guy with an artificial arm, and he's waving with the arm. Oh, Arthur's disappeared. But they meant just, he's got 2 arms and one of them's artificial and he's waving.
Yeah.
And then the artist here was a guy with 2 regular arms. Yeah. And then he's holding an artificial arm and he's waving it around. And,
that's so 2000 AD. That's awesome.
And there's another one.
Way better that way.
Right? The Outriders story, which is this might be a Judge Dredd one. It's supposed to be, the character is here. They're flanked by some Outriders. And what the writer meant was people on motorcycles and stuff. Yeah. But the artist didn't know that. So they drew a bunch of people on horses.
Oh, very good.
Yeah. And then they had to go back and do it again. So.
Oh man.
Yeah. But it's nice.
Those horses robots, man.
Yeah.
Just make them a little shiny, call it a day.
Exactly. Or just draw some rivets and.
Hey, it's back.
Yeah, but it's kind of gratifying to know that, as much access as we have to information, to all these other countries and different cultures, that people are still doing that. It's very gratifying.
The gap between different people's cultures because of languages it can be awkward, but it can be a great source of entertainment and misunderstandings is what fiction is all about. Every kind of fiction, disagreements and misunderstandings. So when you have something like that, I mean, some of the great language in 2008 comes from supposedly from Jerry Finlay Day, who created Rogue Trooper, among other things, from his atrocious typing. He would just bash out the scripts, and sometimes the keys would be the right ones, and sometimes they weren't. And so the word "skrotnik," which, as we all know from 2008, means excellent or very, very good, comes from the word escorting. So he apparently typed in a script where these characters were, I don't know, escorting across the plains or something like that. And they're all looking at this word "skrotnik" going, we don't know what this is, but those words get picked up, and that's kind of, it adds to the rich culture we have in 2008. I mean, 45 years of this stuff. I mean, that's longer than 4 decades.
Yeah.
It's amazing, It's a huge amount of time. I mean, if 45 years, I mean, if you ate cake every day for 45 years, you'd be dead.
Yeah,
so that's just amazing.
Die.
Think about it.
Oh, I think that's a pretty good note to wrap things up on. But before we
cake, yes.
Yeah, don't eat too much cake or you'll die. That's it. Read 2000 AD instead. There you go. Yeah. Well, thank you all for coming to this panel. It was so lovely to talk to you all today. Yeah. And before
what have we got coming up soon?
Yeah, before we head off, what has everybody got that they want to plug?
Go Beans.
I should be in this week's 2000 AD with a new series of Intestinauts with Piper. So that's it's going to be fun for everyone.
It's a fantastic strip. Chris, what have you got?
At some point this year, I'm not sure exactly when it comes out. I'm in the Garth Ennis Battle Action Annual or hardcover, whatever it is. So I've got 13, 14 pages of Crazy Keller in there. There's a new Kevin O'Neill story in there too, but that's the real reason to buy this thing.
Yeah, look forward to that. I've got some more 2000 stuff coming up. The Protest X graphic novel is coming soon, next month, April. That's the first 2 books together, and just about to start writing book 4, so that's coming up.
Really enjoying that one.
Oh, thank you. It's mad fun. Well, what about you, Kelly? What are you up to?
Things.
Oh,
I don't know why I said it like that. I'm not hiding anything.
Sure.
Yeah, that's how you know I'm not. No, I write about comics and pop culture on Patreon at Until the End of the World. That's just patreon.com/Until the End of the World. And I am on Twitter doing bad tweets at Kelly Kanayama. It's just my name. So I take it. Oh, I should actually ask all of you, are you on social media where people can find you? I know you are, but
yeah, I'm pretty much on Twitter under my own name, so I'm easily found.
Okay. Chris?
I am the Burnham on Twitter is where I waste most of my time, and then I'm on Instagram as well, but most of the stuff that's there is on Twitter first.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm on Facebook and Twitter, and my blog, Rusty Staples, which is all about comics. So yeah, and I've got my own website and lots of things like that. So I'm quite well versed in wasting my time online.
And that's why we're all here today.
Yay.
Yay. Well, thanks, and stick around to see the rest of the panels. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.